Can I throw it out to the floor, please? Do we have microphones? I should have asked earlier. Do we have roving mics, or do we take it that the room is good enough for people to speak out? Do we have mics? Don't we have mics?
No,
we don't.
We tested the room. We think it's fine.
We think it's okay. Yeah. All right then. I think so. I hand up down here. Yeah.
Olivia, sorry, long-time fan. I just had to say that. I'm watching you. Very impressed with everything you've done. My name's Siobhan, I'm with the Labour Party. I suppose my main question is, and I've just been, a radical feminist for a long time, and I think in Ireland we need to still make some cultural shifts. I mean, way back when you were doing Today Tonight, and then McCafferty would be on, and she'd say, good night sisters, or good evening sisters. I don't think feminism has progressed very much in Ireland since those days, and I think there has to be a movement among women to promote selfishness for women, not putting sons and husbands and every man in the family first, and putting women first, and putting daughters first. And I think there has to be a movement towards this pro-feminism, serious feminism that really hasn't taken hold ever. And I was wondering what the panel thinks about that, and what cultural shifts need to take place within Ireland to help women get to the point where we have 50%, and finally a woman Taoiseach, and maybe even a man in the Áras for a change.
Orla, can I throw that one to you?
What you might, yeah. I suppose there's so much in that, but I think really in terms of that cultural shift, because it's a cultural shift and it's an ideological shift that needs to happen, but it is that issue of things are up for grabs now in terms of how we organise society. And I think for us in the Women's Council, it's about really looking at those structures that are making things so unequal for women. And particularly I think that issue of the number of women at high levels of decision making, because in every other European country where you do have a greater gender balance, you see far more progressive policies in terms of women's equality. So I think that's sort of primary in terms of what needs to be at the top of the agenda. But also I think what's really important in terms of this whole recession is about putting women's voices as part of it, because I think there's been too much of just women being absent from even discussing it, and particularly I think in terms of the mainstream economists. And so there needs to be a greater number of women involved in that debate, and I think that's really important. But I also think just on when you were talking about feminism, I actually think there's a lot of things happening at the moment in terms of really trying to look at where feminism is in Ireland and how it's changing as well. And I know there was a seminar here in Cork only a few weeks ago in terms of looking at building a feminist forum in Cork, and I think things like that are really good.
Okay, I'm going to take another question, if I may, before I just throw it across to, yes, yourself. Yeah.
Just to follow on from what Orla just said regarding including women in the debate, I think it's also important to include men in the debate. And I just returned from an internship with the Irish Mission to the UN in New York, and participated as a delegate in the Commission on the Status of Women. And I'm just reminded of something that was said at an event organised by Care International, which regarding feminism was said the failure of feminism in many ways is that it's often just women talking to women. And if you look around the room here today, that's definitely happening here, and it also did happen at the CSW in the US. 3,000 delegates, most of them women. And I think that's one of the big problems, is that often men balk at the word feminism, which is why, even though my first favourite book was Ride on Rapunzel, Fairy Tales for Feminists, when I was 9, I tend to call myself an equalist now rather than a feminist, even though I know that women are coming from a position of inequality. So I just wanted to kind of remind people of that, and maybe encourage people to talk to the men in their lives about these issues, and when they go home this evening, actually talk to the men about what they've been talking about here, and talk about it in a positive and constructive way.
You were a very advanced 9-year-old. I can remember my 9-year-old's attitude to men was getting an invitation to a birthday party, which she buried in the bottom of her school satchel. And eventually I had to pull it out and say, why didn't you tell me you were invited to Ragnar's birthday party? Because he's a boy. Sorry, there's somebody down here. Yeah.
Hi, I have Rita Dooley's my name, and I have a question. One theme I saw running through all the speeches was how women think about themselves. Okay? The question of our identity, and my question would be, if we are to place ourselves in the political system, It's a question of education, socialisation and confidence. And my question is, do we, number one, as mothers, have to change how we educate our families, not just our daughters? And number two, what has to change in the educational system to stop this trend? Just struck me, that was a theme going through. Like Mary talked about loving herself, Una talked about, you know, being proud of yourself. And I write a column weekly on women, and I come across this underlying, sure, you know how it is, I'm only doing this. That's not a language. If we are to get into a political movement, we have to adopt not a male parlance, but our own strong female parlance. My question to the panel is, on two levels: one, how do we as mothers or parents, cause this to change? And secondly, where in the educational system should this happen? Is it the SPHE module? Where? That's my question.
Valuing yourself and getting away from that syndrome of I'm only a.
Well, you know, if we want to get into the political system, you have to believe yourself. Believe yourself.
Where to start? I think sometimes also we tend to blame ourselves a lot. We take on the sort of the guilt and shame for everything, and for problems also in society in general. But of course, we could stop accepting that the 20-year-old comes home with the laundry for the mother to take care of. Or we could start by making sure that also the boy can make pancakes or do the washing up or whatever. So this is of course important to also get rid of these stereotypes and what men, respective women, should be able to do in a home and to take full responsibility. I attended a conference in Liberia because, as you know, this is the country where the first elected woman president in Africa is running a country these days. And we were there to give her support and help her. So women from all over the world were there. And we had a discussion about climate change. And they, of course, described how important it is that women especially understand what is going on, that they are also given an opportunity to understand this whole difficult issue. And then at the end of the discussion I said, why aren't there an organization called Men Who Fetch Water? Because it's women who carry water, and they have to go further and further away, and this affects the families and the whole social life. And then afterwards a woman, and they laughed a lot at this, of course, but afterwards a woman came up to me and she said, yes, there are men who fetch water. They are called vendors. They will do it for money only. Then they can fetch water. Or there are even men who wash clothes, but they do it as a business. They don't do it for their families. So it was still on the women to do the heavy work of fetching water, fetching firewood, getting firewood, and all of these things. It is important how we treat both the girls and the boys in the family as well. But can you imagine men having the same discussion about, well, should we trust ourselves to accept to be nominated to a political post, or and this was exactly what happened in Norway, where they introduced a quota. So they decided that in the boards of the biggest companies, they would have a quota of 40%. And then all the women that were proposed, they said, well, I don't feel that I know enough of taking on such a task. So then they asked for training, for education. And this was offered to them. And that meant that actually also the men in the boards felt that they had to also go through the same training. Their experience from introducing this quota is 100% positive. It really meant a jump in the quality of the work of these boards. And these women, of course, were excellent. Even without that extra training, they were excellent board members. And it has helped the whole society to develop. And of course, this is something both for men and women in society. And my definition of feminism is that this is equal rights and opportunities and duties for both men and women.